Coming up on Theater Talk.
The joke that was kind of Crummer would always revisit in rehearsals. And he wanted to stay away from this piece they're having like a message or like, and he would joke around and say, and it truly was a band's visit.
You know what, General? You can stay here with us tonight if you want to.
No. You have done too much already.
Okay.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins, and joining me is my guest co-host, Elisabeth Vincentelli, contributor to The New Yorker and The New York Times, and co-host of the Three on the Aisle podcast.
That's right.
We are going to talk about our favorite new musical of the season and last season. The band's visit at the Barrymore Theater with three members of the company, actor Tony Shalhoub, who plays Tufik, the Egyptian band leader.
Thank you, yes.
John Cariani, who plays Itzhak, one of the citizens of this small town where the Egyptian band leader and his band are stranded, and Katrina Lenk, who's sort of the gutsiest, ballsiest, most interesting person in that small town. We are also joined by Jesse Green, co-chief drama critic of the New York Times. Thank you for joining us, Jesse.
I play the critic in the small town.
All right, so Elisabeth.
The band's visit first was produced at the Atlantic Theater off-Broadway last year. Could you tell us a little bit about how the show came about? It is based on a movie of the same title. How did you get into this whole project?
As you said, the movie, it's based on a movie that came out of Israel about 10 years ago. And our main producer, Oren Wolf, got the idea to love the movie and wanted to do it. I think first as a play. His first idea was to do it as a play. And then he realized, well, that seems so similar to the film. The film stands on its own. Why try to duplicate that? What about doing it as a musical? So he contacted David Yazbek, who wrote the music for this piece, and it was a great combination. David loved the story. David is half Lebanese, half Jewish. The perfect person to write the music. And over the course of a lot of years, there were workshops and various cast members assembled.
And your writer, Itamar, is half Israeli, is he not?
That's, I believe.
Fully.
Itamar Moses.
Fully.
Yes. Yes.
He's born here, but his parents were Israeli.
Mm-hmm.
When did they approach you?
Maybe about 3 years ago, there were some early workshops of the piece when Hal Prince was attached to it. He was circling it as the director. And then Hal dropped out, and then David Cromer was brought in to direct. And then we did it at the Atlantic to, even though it was a limited run, it caught fire down there, and there was a lot in.
So you were invited to be in the workshops?
Correct? Yes.
Now, Katrina and John, did you audition?
I did, yes.
You did?
I also did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what did that involve?
Being really nervous and...
Well, for example, we were talking to some people from Hamilton. They said they had to go through 7 auditions.
I think this was maybe three, one initial audition, then 2 callbacks. But I know a couple of cast members in our show as well had multiple casting sessions.
There's something that intrigues me, Tony. I don't think you've done much musical theater, or what?
A very little and a very long.
I'm going to be blunt. Why did they go towards you?
That's what I said. I asked them, why are you coming to me? I'm not known for doing this. I'm not really a singer, and I'm very self-conscious about my singing voice. And they just would not stop pestering me. They did assure me that they would give me a lot of help and vocal coaching and sort of tailor what the singing that I needed to do, tailor it to my limited range, and they just wore me down, and I'm so glad they did.
I found like the transition from acting to singing can be very delicate in a musical. And this, being fairly new to you, did you feel you had to do any adjustments, or did you feel like after a while it was natural?
Well, I was nervous that I would have to do that kind of an adjustment, but David Cromer, our director, very early on in the rehearsal process, wanted us to understand that this was not going to be like other musicals. That didn't have great meaning to me since I hadn't done any musicals, but I had watched them. And he just said, this is going to have a different tone. We're going to, as actors, you're going to approach it differently. It's almost going to feel more like a play with songs rather than a musical. And that was somewhat, that was reassuring.
You play a character who bears a tremendous weight of sadness in his life, and as an audience member sees it, it seems to spend most of the play repressing that, or at least not being very eager in the American way to talk about it constantly. And so the idea of singing is different for a character like that than it might be for the other characters. So was there always going to be a song for you? Did that change? Did they think of not having you sing at all?
Well, after they heard me sing,
They thought of
that. Originally, yeah, you're right. This character, I don't think this character would ever break into song, except for the fact that he meets these people, and especially Katrina's character. And she really draws him out and opens up to him and reveals certain parts of her life and of her, the things that she loves. They're connected. They're connected by music, by Kulthum, by Omar Sharif, by Egyptian music and Egyptian cinema, and even though she's an Israeli. And so he sort of begins to, as Cromer would say, he begins to thaw out during the course of this piece. And she asks him to sing. And at first he hesitates, but eventually he does.
One of my friends came to the show recently and said that she loved the duet with Tony and Katrina. And I said, well, what do you mean duet? And she said, oh, Katrina was singing and he was singing with his hands. And I thought, that's a great way to put it, because it's like a song. It's like a duet. And that's one of my favorite parts. I get to watch that every night because I'm on the side waiting to go on, and I watch them do it. And it is so beautiful the way you conduct the imaginary orchestra while she is singing and watching you. It is a duet. It's beautiful. I never thought of it that way.
John and Katrina, you have a little bit more experience in musicals than Tony, but the general image of the musical is it's more extroverted. It's the idea of selling the number.
Other
and
musicals, right.
The Band's Visit does not sell, or not in the traditional manner we associate with the American musical. Did you guys have to think, okay, I can't be too big in terms of again, modulating the performances, especially in the numbers? Because I wonder if there's this temptation to maybe kind of adjust the levels.
It was fortunate for us, as we were all in the development process of this, and discovering the tone, for example, that we started out at the Atlantic Theater off Broadway.
Far smaller.
We're in a 200-seat house. It's a converted church, really, and that allowed us to trust that the audience would lean in, and that we didn't have to, as you say, sell it, and that there didn't have to be big splashy
tap numbers,
extroverted chorus kick lines and so on. And that now that we've moved uptown and we're in 1,000, I think our theater now is a little over 1,000 seats, we've expanded it somewhat. It does reach out a little further, but it still retains that intimacy. And we still feel that sense that the audience is coming to us rather than us, kind of pouncing on them.
And I think we should say that as delicate and quiet and beautiful as the show is, it's not a downer, and it's terrifically funny.
It's very funny.
And
it's a hopeful, I think, ultimately a hopeful.
And very hopeful. And it's not like denying the sellingness of American musical theater so much as finding a different way to it. It has as powerful as an effect, but through different means that suit the material.
That's very
you wouldn't want to see Hello, Dolly done in this style any more than you want to see this done in the... Well, okay, I understand Bernadette is coming in to replace you, so...
That's what I kind of love, I've come to love about this play, that it's not sentimental.
No?
It's clean of that.
I was interested in what it was like working with the other David in the show,
Yazbek.
David Yazbek, who to me is one of the finest songwriters working on Broadway now. But this score is in a different register from what we've heard from him before. And I like what you said earlier about the lack of sentimentality of the show. His score, it can be very romantic and touching, but it's not cloying, which could have been a danger with some of the
Absolutely.
moods. Was the score pretty much ready to go when you started working on the show The Atlantic, or were there adjustments in terms of how to approach the song? I mean, was he pretty hands-on in terms of the performances, or?
Yeah, I mean, Yazbek was there for all rehearsals and would be hands off until something was going the wrong way, he felt, and then he would chime in, and even as how they work, both David Yazbek and Itamar, well, and David Cromer are. There is no sentimentality and there's no preciousness in the room in the rehearsal at all. So there's.
That's an interesting term, preciousness.
Yeah.
What does he see as preciousness?
I think the joke that was kind of that Cromer would always revisit in rehearsals, and he wanted to stay away from this piece they're having like a message or like, and he would joke around and say, and it truly was a band's visit. That's, we don't want to do.
Or they would say all the time, and this is why our play is important.
Yeah, and then he said, we're gonna
Right.
and we're gonna not do that.
No, when I was doing my lullaby, sometimes I would get really sad while I was singing the lullaby, and he'd say, well, think about this. There's an Egyptian man in the other room, and you're singing to your baby. So what would a dad do in that case? And then I didn't have any trouble at all feeling sad for myself during my song, because he didn't want me to feel bad for myself. I was just stating some facts to my kid, trying to figure out why I'm such a loser. It's not that big a deal. And you're not going to do it.
Right.
You're not going to break down.
No.
I think they kept reminding us, you're not going to cry in front of people you don't know. That's not how we roll. Do you know what I mean? So you're not going to show that stuff in front of people.
I don't know. You don't know my Jewish family.
But
It's not to be missed, the band's visit at the Barrymore Theater. Thank you so much,
Thank
Tony
you.
Shalhoub, Katrina Lenk, John Cariani,
thank you.
Jesse Green of the New York Times, and thank you, my co-host, Elisabeth Vincentelli of Three on the Aisle and all those other major publications.
I'm everywhere.
Everywhere. All right.
Please stop.
Only me, only you when the sun is gone. Only me when the moon falls with the world all around me, with the world around me. Only you when the sun and moon and stars are gone. What's left is only you. Will you answer? Splish splash, I was taking a bath, long about a Saturday night. Yeah, I rubbed up, just relaxing in the tub, thinking everything was alright.
Joining me is my guest co-host, Donna Hanover of Arts in the City here on CUNY TV. And we are here to talk to a longtime friend of Theater Talk, Ted Chapin, who is now the producer of Lyrics and Lyricists at the 92nd Street Y. I want to quickly say that, of course, Ted is also the president and chief creative officer of Rodgers and Hammerstein and has overseen multiple R&H productions and so many other things. Ted, we would take up your segment with your credits.
Don't do
All
it.
right.
But why did you decide to do this at the 92nd Street? Why?
Well, I think part of it is, I can't wait to see what I'm going to do when I grow up. The simple thing is that Hannah Ari Geifman, who runs the Tisch Center up at the Y, asked me. I have done a couple of episodes of the Lyrics and Lyricists, and I realized, because I did my homework, a month after Follies opened, Stephen Sondheim that was the very first season of it. So I went there to see Stephen Sondheim talk about lyrics in May of 1971. So I've sort of known about Lyrics and Lyricists ever since. So I was honored when Deborah Grace Weiner asked me to do one. I enjoyed it, and then I made a couple of comments to Hannah about things that I thought might be looked at. And so I became sort of an unofficial advisor, and then she surprised me last spring by saying, would you take over the series?
Wow.
And she reminded me, I said, I'm intrigued. And then the next morning I called and I said, I'm actually fascinated.
And did you at all think, how can I make the time?
Of course, of course. I mean, I should say that Rodgers and Hammerstein, the family sold the business about 8 years ago to a Dutch company, which in turn sold it to an American company in the summer. So the Rodgers and Hammerstein thing, I think, is looking good, but part of the sort of morphing of Rodgers and Hammerstein is to make me creative officer and not the person responsible for all things. So that has allowed me to do some other things.
Good deal.
And I realized in my life there have been moments where I have been part of producing, I mean, that's the right word for it, whether it's putting together, when my father was at Columbia, that we sort of did an industrial to help kick off a campaign. I had a friend who wrote industrials in those years, so I produced that. So I've produced things from time to time. I'm not the kind of person who wants my name above the title all by itself. I mean, it takes a mighty ego and a huge checkbook to be able to do that. But I enjoy being part of it. I enjoy the collaboration.
And I want to quickly say that you were an assistant on the Follies back in 1971 and then wrote that terrific book.
Everything Was Possible.
Everything Was Possible.
Yeah. That was great. No, that was fun.
No,
I mean,
a classic, yeah.
I was in college and just wanted to as Hamilton would say, I wanted to be in the room where it happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was in college, so I kept a journal. And years later, because Follies became Follies, the opportunity to go back into my journal and create a book about how a musical is put together was offered to me, and it was too alluring to pass up. And I found the time for that too. That was more, I said, in the dedication, I thank my wife and my 2 daughters, because I said, theirs is the time I stole to write the book.
Well, but they're glad now.
Yeah.
So what is coming up on Lyrics and Lyricists?
Well, when Hannah asked me to do this, I thought it would make sense to introduce I said, with all due respect, the announcement of my being hired is modestly interesting to people. But if we can put the season together and announce the season, that would be more interesting. So the 2 sort of linchpins that I thought of right off the bat, one was that I had dinner with Jonathan Groff and sort of bounced the idea of Bobby Darin to him, because I'd seen a musical in Australia, didn't think it was terribly good, but the story was fascinating.
And what made you think Jonathan Groff, Bobby Darin?
I don't really know, because I've known Jonathan on and off for years, and he's the kind of person who will email me and say, let's go to see something. So, we went to see Natasha Pierre, and it was funny, as we entered the theater, the ticket taker looked up and saw the 2 of us and said, I just love your Follies book. So I said to Jonathan Groff, oh, you don't know who you are. No, but at dinner that night, because I'd been thinking about seeing if there was a way to take the story of Bobby Darin, who was a songwriter. He wrote 160 songs.
What's his most famous song?
Dream Lover.
Oh, he did write that.
And Splish Splash are the 2 that he wrote. Mac the Knife and Beyond the Sea are 2 that he sung.
Yes.
Didn't write.
Yes.
But anyway, it's a very complicated story with many twists and turns and tricky to tell. But I have to say, the group that we put together to do it at Lyrics and Lyricists.
And so that was the kickoff?
That was the first one. So I thought of that. The other thing I thought of was, let's do a throwback to the early days and let's invite a living lyricist. So Lynn Ahrens is going to be, an evening with Lynn Ahrens in May. And that's been absolutely fascinating, because at first she was a little concerned, and because some of the Lyrics and Lyricists have gotten elaborate. There's going to be dancing in the Irving Berlin one, for example.
Ooh.
And they're finding a way to rehearse it all.
Now, the Irving Berlin, you've worked a lot. You worked a lot at R&H with.
Yes, I've represented Irving Berlin.
Right.
It's not that I put that one in because of that, but Irving Berlin is one of the handful of composers and songwriters that the audience at the Y loves and would be happy if we just did the same old every year.
No, I think that Irving Berlin has sufficient stature that we don't detect nepotism.
Thank you.
But what angle are you taking with Irving Berlin?
Interesting that you say that. The point of view is, we call it Irving Berlin American. His is the quintessential immigrant story. He arrived at this country age 5, not speaking English, and became arguably the nation's songwriter. Aside from God Bless America, if he wrote a ballad, it's Always, or All Alone by the Telephone. He wrote Show Business. There's no business like show business. He wrote for Fred Astaire, Cheek to Cheek. He kind of went, quintessentially, characteristic songs of almost every aspect of America.
He could adapt to whatever
he just
the
did.
need
Yeah,
was.
he was like a chameleon, and also learned how to use English pretty well. So the idea, without being too obvious, but like this is the story of what an immigrant can actually do in this country.
Is someone playing Irving Berlin, or is this?
Stephen DeRosa will be part of us.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And we'll see exactly, I mean, part of what we did with the Bobby Darin thing is Jonathan Groff didn't play Bobby Darin, but he didn't not play Bobby Darin. And I think Stephen DeRosa also will not necessarily play Irving Berlin, but he's not going to not.
And there's a resemblance.
Yeah, and he's
Stephen
also,
Berlin.
there's some very funny songs that Irving Berlin wrote, especially in the early years. You know, if you don't want my peaches, you'd better stop shaking my tree.
I sang that in a college play.
Did you really?
Good.
Well, it's a classic, let's face it.
Right.
So now I noticed too that you're doing Frank Loesser.
Yes, David Loud, who has been consistently among the best of the presenters of Lyrics and Lyricists. I actually approached him about doing one this year, and he pulled out a piece of sheet music from his bag and showed it to me. It's a sheet music of Frank Loesser called "Why Do I Always Get the Neck of the Chicken?" And I confessed I had never heard of this song. And he said he wrote a lot of silly songs in Hollywood, lyrics only, before he moved back east and wrote all those classic musicals. So we're going to examine Frank Loesser's lyrics. I think there will be more of the Hollywood stuff than we know.
Right.
And then, as I always say, I mean, a role of a producer should say, now, please give us some of the good tunes that we're all waiting to hear.
Give us some Guys and Dolls.
Yes, please. Now, he
So
will, he
now,
will.
is it part of your role as a producer that you have to negotiate the rights to all this music?
The 92nd Street Y has for years done things with cooperation from everybody. They do have ASCAP license and BMI. But yes, I have for example, the Bernstein one used a clip from Candide, a concert of Candide, because Amanda Green, daughter of Adolph Green, is the host of that one.
You were going to say what's going to happen with the Lynn Ahrens.
Yeah, the Lynn Ahrens, she's going to be sitting on stage. She was concerned because she thought it was a very big deal. And I said, no, I see the curtain going up and you're sitting in a chair, Lynn. And it all happens around you. But also another fun moment as a producer is I said to Lynn, who should direct this? Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, I don't know. And then I said, well, I just pretend that anybody's available. And she thought for a moment, she said, Jason Danieli is a very smart actor. I think there's a director in him. Ask him. So Jason is going to make his directorial debut directing An Evening with Lynn Ahrens in May. And what I've said to Lynn is, tell us the good stories. Tell us some stories that maybe we don't know, that she wrote a Klondike bar commercial. Not everybody knows that.
She wrote that famous Klondike?
We'll hear it. We'll hear it. And Schoolhouse Rock she wrote for.
Oh, that.
But also what I would like her to do is to talk about some ideas that didn't work. Because I think, especially for the Lyrics and Lyricist audience, that is used to both hearing songs that they know or they don't know and learning about them, it's always instructive to find things that didn't work for some reason.
Now, I want to ask you, you've worn so many hats in the theater, producing and running RNH and all these other things, and I want you to really think for a minute, what is your advice to people? Because people go to you over and over again to be involved, to consult you. What's your advice to people to get themselves in that position?
Very good question. What I always want to recognize in people who ask me a question is, first of all, how passionate are they and how focused are they? Because I will say to people, if the other day there was somebody who came to see me and she was very vague. And I said, do you want to be a publicist? Do you want to be a stage manager? It's a lot easier for you and for the people like me. I mean, if there's a job in stage management that you want, I could call and say, would you talk to that person? But if you say, I kind of like the idea of working in the Broadway.
It's too amorphous.
There's nothing to do.
Now, your coming into theater was so different than most people. You were born into it in a certain way, right?
In a certain way, yes. Yes, my family was involved. My father, Schuyler Chapin, who I think I told you earlier, had great affection for you. And it was the Cultural Affairs Commissioner. His last job was Cultural Affairs Commissioner of the City of New York.
He got married in my backyard, actually.
He did indeed. Great party.
When I lived at Gracie.
You had a fine backyard.
To my stepmother. But he was involved with a whole lot of different jobs. I mean, he was the head of the classical division of Columbia when stereo was in. So not only was he doing all those show albums I loved, but he was recording Leonard Bernstein in the Philharmonic and Eugene Ormandy and Philadelphia Orchestra. He then went to be the first vice president of programming at Lincoln Center because they built all those buildings for companies, none of whom had a 52-week-a-year season. So they suddenly realized as landlords, there are going to be a lot of empty buildings. So they did the summer festival and the film festival.
Wow.
And then he was general manager of the Met, which is sort of dream job. And he was the number 2 to the man who was hired to take Rudolph Bing's place, who was then killed in a car accident 18 days after he took over. So Dad stepped up to that. Wow. So he had these incredible jobs. So there was always an opportunity where, and I have to say, my parents never forced it on us. But it was like, I'm going over to see, Tales of Hoffman. Do you want to come? And my brothers and I, yeah, sure.
So you inherited the work ethic.
I think so.
Well, Ted, it is absolutely wonderful to have you here. Next up is Irving Berlin's America. Then we have Lynn Ahrens. We have Frank Loesser. Just for the first season.
That's the first season, and then who knows what's next?
And also there is talk of Bobby Darin coming to Broadway.
There is.
I have heard.
There is. I mean, I have to say, we never intended that. We who put that together wanted to tell the story as well as we could, and that's what I think we did. But this is the town that if people like it, you never can tell what's going to happen.
You never can tell. Well, I hope it does so I can see it. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Of Arts in the City and former First Lady of New York, but we don't talk about that. All right. Very good. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ted Chapin.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you